Look around the world right now. From the cold, orderly streets of Scandinavian capitals to the dust-choked alleyways of refugee camps in East Africa, from heated parliamentary debates in Tel Aviv to tense community meetings in suburban Canada. There's a constant, a recurring headline, a presence that prompts both compassion and controversy. Eritreans. And from those host countries, a question is rising, not in a whisper, but in protests, policy debates, and news reports. Why? Why is this small, often overlooked nation on the Red Sea, with an estimated population smaller than Los Angeles, producing one of the most significant, widespread, and politically charged diasporas on the planet? Why does their presence so consistently spark complex, painful clashes over asylum, integration, and the very right to protest? To put it bluntly, Eritreans are everywhere. Not as casual travelers, but as permanent fixtures of the global landscape of displacement. To understand this modern exodus, to grasp why they flee, why they can't return, and why their communities abroad are so tragically and violently divided, we have to rewind the tape. Not just a few years, but decades. We have to understand a national story forged in the fires of a brutal 30-year war, hardened in the isolation of a pariah state, and defined by a system of control so comprehensive it has been called a crime against humanity. This isn't just another migration story. This is the story of a national trauma echoing across the globe. This is the anatomy of a diaspora engineered by a state. Let's begin. Our starting point isn't today. It's 1991. The world was changing. The Soviet Union collapsed. Apartheid was ending in South Africa. And in the Horn of Africa, after 3 relentless decades of conflict, a disciplined guerrilla army, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, marched into their capital, Asmara. They had achieved the impossible, defeating the colossal, Soviet-backed Ethiopian military to win independence. The euphoria was absolute, and it was global. For the Eritrean diaspora that had formed during the war, people who had fled the fighting to Sudan, Europe, and America, this was a moment of supreme vindication. They had fundraised, lobbied, and dreamed of this day. It was the archetypal story of the brave little nation. The future was not just bright, it was deserved. But that future was built on a foundation of unimaginable sacrifice. The war wasn't a brief conflict. It was the entire reality for 2 generations. It's estimated 65,000 Eritrean fighters died. Civilian casualties were catastrophic. This war created the first wave of the diaspora. Hundreds of thousands who became refugees in Sudan, Kenya, and beyond. They were exiles of war, but their hearts remained tethered to the struggle back home. When independence came, many returned, flush with skills, money, and hope. There was a short, vibrant period of rebuilding. But the psyche of the new state and the party that became its sole government, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, was permanently shaped by the siege mentality of war. The enemy was gone, but the mindset remained. Total mobilization, absolute loyalty, and a deep suspicion of any dissent. Then it all shattered again. In 1998, a brutal border war erupted with Ethiopia. This conflict, often called a war of folly, killed perhaps 100,000 people and erased the peace. It also gave the government its lasting pretext. Before the war, national service was 18 months, a tough but finite period of military training and civic work. After the war, it was made indefinite. This is the single most important fact to understand about modern Eritrea. For most conscripts, this isn't a stint in the army. It's a life sentence. Here's the mechanics. At 17 or 18, every Eritrean, male and female, is conscripted. Their final year of high school is often conducted in a military camp. Upon graduation, they are automatically enlisted. The pay is crushing, sometimes less than $30 a month. You have no choice in your assignment. You could be digging trenches on a fortified border for decades. Or you could be assigned as a forced teacher, a clerk, or labor for a state-owned enterprise. You cannot quit. You cannot pursue higher education or a proper career without state permission, which is virtually never granted. Your movement is controlled. Your future is confiscated. This system is not primarily about national defense. It is a mechanism of total social control over the entire youth population. It is the engine of the exodus. So, for a young Eritrean, the calculation is horrifyingly simple. Option A. Disappear into this open-ended servitude with no chance to build a family, a home, or a life. Option B. Risk everything to escape. And when we say risk everything, we mean it. This leads to the most heartbreaking cultural ritual of modern Eritrea, the silent goodbye. You do not tell your parents you are leaving. You do not tell your siblings. To do so would implicate them if you are captured. One night you simply vanish. You pay a smuggler, you walk for days through the treacherous western deserts or mountainous southern borders, evading patrols that have shoot-to-kill orders. If you are caught, you are thrown into an underground prison, often a metal shipping container, where torture is routine. If you succeed, your first act as a free person might be a fraught satellite phone call from a Sudanese town. "Hello, Mom. I made it." The trauma of this rupture, leaving your aging parents, knowing you may never see them again, is the founding trauma of the modern diaspora. You become a ghost in your own family's life, only reappearing as a voice on the phone or a line on a money transfer receipt. This creates an immense, relentless pressure. The core cultural driver in the Eritrean diaspora is therefore remittance and survival guilt. Your success abroad is not for you. It is the moral justification for your escape. Every dollar you send home is a lifeline for your family and an apology for your absence. You are not just a migrant. You are a remote life support system for those still trapped inside. The weight of this is colossal. So where do they go? The escape routes from Eritrea are now legendary in the annals of human suffering, some of the most dangerous on Earth. Route 1. The Eastern Route. You cross the Red Sea from Sudan in a smuggler's boat to Yemen, a country itself destroyed by war. From there, you try to reach Saudi Arabia or the UAE, where you often end up in detention or as an utterly exploited laborer with no rights. Route 2. The Southern Route. This is the most infamous. Through the Sahara of Sudan into the lawless anarchy of Libya. You face kidnappers, torturers, and human traffickers. If you survive that, you pawn everything for a spot on an overloaded inflatable raft to cross the Mediterranean to Italy or Malta. Thousands of Eritreans have drowned in that sea. Route 3. The direct regional exodus. To Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya. While safer from maritime death, you end up in vast, stagnant refugee camps, places like Shimelba or Kakuma, where you can be warehoused for a decade or more with no prospect of resettlement or a real future. It's a life in purgatory. These journeys, costing $10,000 and $15,000 and immeasurable trauma, are the ultimate testament to what is being fled. No one submits to this unless the alternative is a form of living death. And so they scatter. Let's trace the map. Europe is the primary destination. Sweden has one of the largest communities, tens of thousands strong. Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Norway, the UK, Italy, all have significant populations. In many European cities, Eritreans are the single largest African community. Israel was a major destination in the 2000s. Tens of thousands crossed the Sinai Desert, often facing torture, to seek asylum. They became the central characters in Israel's fierce political debate over refugees. North America. Communities are established in Toronto, Calgary, Seattle, Minneapolis, and across the USA. Africa. Beyond the camps, there are nodes in South Africa, Uganda, Kenya, and of course, Sudan. And further, Australia. New Zealand, a truly global presence. But here is where the story twists into something even more painful. The Eritrean diaspora is not a unified community. It is a battlefield. It is violently, tragically divided. A schism of trauma. On one side, the regime's supporters, often from the older First Wave. They are the ones who funded the independence war. They see President Isaias Afwerki and the PFDJ as the unwavering guardians of that hard-won sacred sovereignty. They believe in the narrative of a nation under perpetual threat, requiring unity and sacrifice above all. They organize the large official cultural festivals abroad, which are also crucial fundraising venues for the regime, via a mandatory 2% diaspora tax. On the other side, the opponents. This is overwhelmingly the new generation, those who fled the system itself. They see the regime as a tyrannical jailer that stole their youth and futures. They see these festivals not as cultural celebrations, but as propaganda rallies and fundraising schemes for their oppressor, held safely on foreign soil, where the critics they silence at home are now free to shout. This schism explodes into real-world violence. Festival venues in Europe and Canada are routinely stormed. Pro-government attendees and anti-government protesters clash with a fury that shocks local police. It's not a debate, it's a street fight. The community is ripped apart by a political conflict that mirrors the repression back home, but is now enacted in the civic spaces of their host countries. This is a key reason for the complaint. Nations are hosting not just a refugee community, but a live, imported political civil war, which leads to the host country's dilemma. Politicians and citizens look at Eritrea and see a paradox. A country with no active war, officially at peace. They send delegations, which are given tightly choreographed tours by the government, and some come back questioning the blanket need for asylum. They ask, are they all really refugees? What these assessments often fatally miss is the psychological and systemic reality. The persecution isn't always a targeted knock on the door at midnight. For the average young person, it is the indiscriminate, lifelong net of indefinite conscription, a system the UN has said may constitute a crime against humanity. The prison is the entire structure of the country, so host nations are stuck. They are hosting a population that cannot be sent back, that is deeply traumatized, and that is internally at war with itself. Integration becomes a Herculean task when a community's heart and mind are perpetually locked in a struggle with a homeland thousands of miles away. This brings us to the final, fundamental question. What would make it stop? What would allow this bleeding of a nation to cease, and this global diaspora to finally heal? The answer is deceptively simple and infinitely complex. It would require the unconditional end of indefinite national service. It would require a constitution and the rule of law. It would require the release of all political prisoners, a free press, and genuine political pluralism. It would require, in essence, a peaceful transition from a totalitarian system to something resembling a normal state. But there is no sign of that. The system is calcified. The generation that won the war holds absolute power. The economy is propped up by diaspora remittances and mining revenues that flow to the state. There is no internal pressure valve because all dissent is crushed. The only pressure valve is the exodus itself. So the flight continues. The silent goodbyes happen under cover of darkness every single night. The deadly desert and sea routes remain busy. The diaspora grows larger, and with it, the internal fractures and the consternation of the world. The story of the Eritrean diaspora is not one of ambition. It is not a search for greener economic pastures. It is a story of consider moving back in the future preservation. The preservation of self, of future, of the very possibility of a life. They are not everywhere because they want to be. They are everywhere because their homeland, for all its stunning beauty and proud history, has been engineered into a factory of lost potential and controlled despair. They carry the trauma of the silent goodbye, the guilt of the remittance, and the bitter political divisions of a frozen conflict. They are a nation in exile, a global community whose existence is the direct result of a single, inescapable truth. For hundreds of thousands of Eritreans, the only way to survive their country is to leave it. And until that fundamental truth changes, the map will keep lighting up with their presence, and the world will keep asking, why are Eritreans everywhere?